We're going to start first off with a statement, a land acknowledgement from Laurie Swanson. Can we pass Laurie the mic?
I think I can deliver without the mic.
If you use the mic, it records better.
Okay, all right. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm getting hand signals from the crew. I would ask that you all stand and join me as I offer a land acknowledgement. With humility and in the spirit of reconciliation, we gratefully acknowledge the unceded ancestral lands of the Syilx, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Sinixt First Nations, where we gather this evening and where we get to live, love, work, and play. We also recognize the chartered Métis communities that make the Kootenay, Columbia, South Rockies their home. Thank you. Hi, hi.
I stand corrected. It's Kootenay-Columbia-Southern Rockies is the new name of this riding association. And welcome trail. I know some people aren't happy about it, but you're newly in the same federal riding as Nelson, Creston, Cranbrook, and all the way to the Alberta border. I can tell you that the Electoral District Association, your NDP association, is happy to have the trail voters in the riding association. My name is Keith Wiley. I'm your MC today, and to my left is one of our nominees for our candidate position, Keith Page. And to his left is Kallee Linz. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute here, but I'm just going to tell you how the evening's going to go. It's very simple, and we hope to take about an hour and a half. Maybe we're not tight for time. We could, if we're having a great time, we'll go a little longer. But we're going to go for about an hour and a half, and we're going to start off with some introductions, and then we're going to have questions. First of all, some of us on the executive of the Electoral District Association and me have written some questions that we think cover a lot of the bases that we wanted our nominees to speak to if they want to become our candidate. So we're going to go with those 6 questions first. And then there's going to be a little bit of a special message because you always have to talk about the nuts and bolts of the reality of running our party. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to go to your questions from the floor. And we're going to take all the questions as we can. Galen is going to be our timekeeper. And we're going to be really rough. Everything is going to be timed 1 minute. The candidates will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. After that, they'll have 1 minute to answer a question. And if you pose a question from the floor, and we'll pass the mic to you, and we would ask you to use the mic if you can. And you will have 1 minute to ask your question. And we ask you to really respect that for the rights of everybody here. I didn't check out, it's a good idea to... That's why I have 2. You're kidding.
That one's still running.
Did you try the power switch and all? I just charged the battery. Oh, that one there. Thanks, Jim. Jim didn't know he was going to do this tonight, and I said, Jim, can you do this? And he said yes, so I was very happy. If you can maybe mute your phones so that we don't have a lot of dingle-dangle in the meeting, that would be very nice. And I wanted to ask about washrooms. Are there washrooms here? They're just at the back around the corner? They're not hard to find? Okay. I'm going to do as good a job as possible of alternating between our speakers so that they address it one at a time. And alternate. I'll start with Keith one, and then with Kallee the next, so that we see it as fair as possible. The only other thing to say is we're going to allow, after each candidate has addressed a question, we're going to allow them, if they want to bring anything else up briefly, we can have another minute from each candidate to discuss the topic a little further, if they so choose. So we should be able to get through a lot of questions in an hour and a half. I think I'm so glad you're all here. It's so nice to see such a good crowd on pretty short notice. Mind you, we're all on pretty short notice with the whole election cycle these days, so we have to be pretty responsive to be ready on time. The one other thing I really should mention is we're not voting on who's going to be the NDP candidate tonight. That vote will happen on February 27th. So that's going to be a little later in the process, and there's going to be several of these events. Yes, Jacqueline?
I still have a nomination to read, so that is going to be electronic, and there will be a 24-hour period until we know the results. So that's something important.
That's the other thing. That's the other main thing, is you have to be a member of the federal NDP to vote, and you have to be in good standing. And the deadline is, I think, 47 days or some specific number before the February 27th.
January 13th.
Monday.
Monday.
January 13th, Monday, is the deadline to get your membership. We've got to have a table at the back, and you can sign up and sign your life away and become a member there easily and online right away. But if you're not a member on after Monday, you don't get to vote. So that's pretty key. Tell your friends. With that, any major questions? Have I left anything else out?
I don't think so.
Okay. We'll start, and I want the candidates to introduce themselves. I know them, but not very well. Well, I know Keith. I've known Keith for years. Kallee, not as well. But I'll let you introduce yourselves. Kallee, can we start with you? And you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Oh, and here's a question for you, Keith. What time warning are you going to give us? 30 seconds, or what do we got? 15. Okay, we got to wrap up quick. All right. Well, I will start now then. Firstly, thank you all so much for being here on a Saturday, no less. Thanks to the Skills Center and Morag for having us, Lori for the land acknowledgement, and the Riding Association for pulling this together. Since I have a whole 2 minutes, I'll start from the beginning. I grew up in Castlegar, where I was a very nerdy kid. I was specifically interested in 3 things: politics, journalism, and the performing arts. And I still continue to love all of those things. And those passions took me to McGill, where I studied political science. And I don't take that for granted at all. I'm a first-generation college student and actually a first-generation high school graduate. So I'm always grateful that I had that opportunity. And that's where I really formalized my involvement with the NDP. I was co-president of NDP McGill, and we were so active pushing back against some of Harper's policies, mandatory minimum sentencing, and all of those awful, awful things. After my undergrad, I did a brief stint at the CBC, went on to grad school in Toronto, and then I very organically found myself in the nonprofit sector. And I worked in the nonprofit sector based in Toronto for a whole decade, really specifically working in national organizations. So that's why this federal vantage point feels very comfortable for me. And, life happened, COVID happened. My now husband and I decided we'd really like to be in BC. So I'm so grateful to have had a bit of a homecoming and to have come back to the Kootenays in 2022. And I get to spend my days supporting the wonderful arts and culture sector here across the Columbia Basin. One of the biggest privileges I have in my work is stewarding a $2.4 million contract with the Columbia Basin Trust, through which we get to put money directly in the hands of artists and into organizations to create community benefit here in the Columbia Basin. So I'm so grateful for all of my partners that I get to work with each and every day, and I filled my time and then some. Excellent.
Keith Page.
Thank you. My name is Keith Page. For those of you who don't know me, I come from central Alberta. I grew up on a working cattle ranch. We had about 300 head of cattle and about 6 sections of land that we used to farm barley and grain and lentils, and that was the first 20 years of my life. That family farm that I grew up on, eventually I went off to Calgary after high school and started in the tech sector downtown, got my footings and got my chops done in Calgary there until my partner got a job at the Ministry of Transportation in Nelson. And so when he came out here, I followed him afterwards and started to settle about 20 years ago in the area. It took me a while to bounce around between Trail and Nelson to find work as it is in this area and get my footings in the tech sector within within Nelson, and so I started my own business about 12 years ago and have built a team and a business there in downtown Nelson. I've always been incredibly interested in politics and the environment and technology and solving problems, been taking things apart and putting them back together for a very long time, understanding how it all fits together and what the best things need to happen for everybody. And so I threw my hat into the race for City Council in 2018 and began taking a look at what municipal local government looks like from a bird's eye view and understanding that side of how we build our communities. Did that, have been doing that ever since. In the last election, I was moved my way up into a second term, and I was selected by our council to represent us at the Regional District of Central Kootenay, where I've been basically working 3 jobs at this point between work and City Council and the Regional District, and in that work too, I've been the president of the Association of Kootenay Boundary Local Governments, and that is the association that represents all the mayors and councillors in this area to the province, and so that's what I've been doing.
Sorry. What we decided that our first question was to ask them why they want to run for the NDP in our electoral district. And we'll start this time with Keith.
Sure. The number one thing I've been noticing as I've been working in local government is whether or not our federal conversations are being productive and whether or not we're working towards getting solutions. And so as I've been dealing with affordable housing, dealing with the renewal of our infrastructure, dealing with the programming and funding that has to do with how people are succeeding in our society, it became more and more apparent that we need to change the kind of conversation. And I know this sounds like one of those political things that political people say, but we need to change the conversation of and how we're having the conversation at the federal level. I strongly believe that when we work together, we can get a lot done, and we have to do that across partisan lines. And I think it's time to basically send some good representation back to Ottawa and get some stuff working for this area.
All right, now we're down to 1 minute limits.
That goes quickly. Yeah.
Goes real quick. Well, I wanted to share about why I'm interested in the kind of work that politicians and MPs do. I've learned so much about my skill set and my strengths from other people. And while I started my career with a focus on marketing and communications, I've regularly, for the last 15 years, been put into positions where relationship building is really critical. That's something I do every day in my role as an executive director, building relationships with funders, with our grantees, with program participants and colleagues across the sector. I love that work. I love talking to people. I love understanding problems and experiences that people are going through. And like Keith said, we need more dialogue now than ever. And I love that work. And I would love to be doing that work with all of you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kallee. You should keep the mic because you're going to start on the next question. We wanted to ask both of you, and we'll start this time with Kallee, what is your sense of the main issues that are of concern to voters in the Kootenay riding?
Sure. Really top of mind for me is how much work we have to do on climate change preparedness and impact mitigation in particular, specifically thinking of the cultural sector and the impact of the wildfires on large events and so many other pieces of our economy. There's just so much work to be done to ensure that the supports are in place before they are needed. I think a lot about the cold snap that happened in January in 2024. I love the wineries in Cruston. I'm a subscriber to one. And many of those wineries had 100% crop loss, just absolutely devastating. And the status quo is that industry groups have to go and beg after the fact for the kinds of supports that they need to get their businesses going again. I think we need to be really proactive in ensuring that federal programming is in place, supports are in place, so that that help can be accessed quickly whenever it is needed.
Thank you. Keith.
I think fundamentally we're facing down the barrel of a climate crisis. And in order to carry the work forward into doing something about that, we need to make sure that people are being brought along with us. People that are being left behind as there's disasters and as we're rebuilding are going to fight against the efforts that we're doing. And honestly, combating climate action on a federal level is about making sure that we're protecting the value and the productivity of future generations. So my focus, as much as it is climate, and Nelson, we've been very front of center on the climate work. I think on a federal level, it's really about supporting people making better wages and dealing with stagnation there, and making sure that the pieces of our economy that are currently being subsidized and benefiting from taking advantage of the climate are being held responsible, and that we're shifting the gears of the economy and the mechanics of the economy into making sure we're improving and investing in long-term value into our landscape.
Kallee, did you have anything to add?
I came prepared with 2 responses for each question in case Keith here took one from me first. So my first one was related to climate impacts. My second, which I do need to give a nod to just so it's in the room because it impacts so many of us, I'm still waiting for a family doctor. I'm sure there's a lot of us in the room today that are in a similar situation. And it's about to get a whole lot more dire. In 2022, 15% of doctors across Canada were 65 or older. Many of those are probably already retired. You look 5 years out, we are absolutely in a crisis point with access to care. So I really wanted to advocate for policies that put more medical students into the pipeline, more health professionals across the board. We can really expand the student loan forgiveness program that is currently active for healthcare graduates who work in rural areas. I would love to see the 1-year waiting period taken away. I'd really love to see higher limits on what that loan forgiveness can entail, and I'd like to see it expanded to other kinds of practitioners as well that currently aren't included.
Keith?
Sure.
Hold the mic quite close.
Quite close, apparently.
Well, not that close.
The other issue that I think is really important, and this is a generational issue, is housing. As we have had the changes in our economy, as we've shifted away from a productive economy that has a strong manufacturing base, we've had this preponderance within our economy to be making money off of real estate, and that has been at the detriment of an entire generation and their ability to build wealth. When you look at the numbers, the youth today, and I count myself in that, our generation has a shadow of the wealth generation, of the wealth accumulation that has happened before, and it's putting everybody in a very dire strait. It's giving them a lack of capacity to build lives, to start families, and it's having impacts in terms of how they relate to their communities. And so I think we need to continue to invest in purpose-built, non-market housing to help complement and balance out what's going out in our housing stock.
Thank you. And Keith, you'll start the next round. Those are very good answers. Thank you. I'm delighted to hear about climate and coming up first. I'm very happy about that myself. What are other issues that you think face all Canadians now that may not be top of mind? What are the buried issues that you think we need to deal with that maybe people aren't aware of?
One of the areas that I think we need to do a better job of is, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of how we have poor dialogue as a nation and how we choose what we're focused on, but we're not building the kind of infrastructure and renewing the infrastructure the way we need to be. Much of what we rely upon today for our communities and between communities was built in the post-World War II era. A lot of it's coming due. A lot of it is coming due at a much higher cost than we expect. Our expectations around regulations have changed, and so we have to build it to a much higher capacity, and we need those investments, and we need to connect this country around ground transportation, whether that's bus transportation, whether that's cargo, whether that's rail. We need to be able to move product and people between communities in a much more efficient fashion, and we need those investments to set ourselves up for success into the future.
You didn't actually say buses. It's okay. Kallee.
Buses.
Thank you. Kallee.
Keith, I think because you guys have the mics right next to each other, Keith is getting some feedback when he speaks.
Okay.
I think that's what's happening.
Scoot. Shall we scoot? Are we still in camera if we scoot over?
No, stay close, but it's...
You're sounding good, but because
I gotta move away from Keith.
Separate the Keiths. Split the Keiths. Sorry. Awesome. Well, I love this question. Thank you for that. I care deeply about our information ecosystem, and I'm deeply concerned about the increasing speed with which Canada is losing our media outlets. Between 2008 and 2018, 250 outlets closed or were acquired in Canada, and the majority of those are local newspapers. There have been some recent programs aimed at supporting new upstart outlets, but they're not replacing the ones that we've lost, and we need so much more investment in that area, particularly with a focus on rural reporting capacity. What we saw at Kootenay Co-op Radio is a reporter was brought in, but the program funding was so short, honestly, it wasn't worth bringing them back in subsequent terms, just with the burden of those applications. We lost a reporter at Kootenay Co-op Radio. So we need to really expand those programs, we need to bolster them, and we need to tailor them for rural communities.
Keith?
Rebuttal?
Did you raise your other issue that's not a top of mind?
Well, I would agree with Kallee on this, and this whole process is really much a collaborative one. But being in the tech space, I think it's really obvious that our lack of holding big tech companies accountable for the effect that they're having on the population and community and across the world is to our detriment. We really need to look at the amount of advertising dollars that have left local journalism and been consolidated by large global tech companies, and then not being held accountable for the impacts of the ecosystem they build. In my own personal life, as far as doing tech support, the banks in town send most of the seniors over to my shop whenever they are subject to financial scams on the internet, and predominantly it is the very large amount of blind advertising dollars that are feeding people all sorts of scams, sending them down rabbit holes, radicalizing them on YouTube. It's all driven by the ad industry and the lack of regulation in that space.
And we'll have some rebuttals.
I just have one more thing to add. There is no chance in hell I will stand by when Pierre Poilievre tries to defund the CBC. I care deeply about that institution, and just have to say, yay, CBC.
Did you get a rebuttal time?
I've
lost track. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad somebody's keeping track. That's supposed to be my job. Over the last 40 years, wealthy Canadians have become a lot wealthier. And the rest of us have been getting a smaller and smaller share of the pie. What is the solution? What is the NDP solution to this question? And we'll start with Keith.
Predominantly what we need to be doing is ensuring that we're getting better jobs and we're investing in youth. That there's been conversations already about loan forgiveness for highly technical trades and making sure that education is not a barrier to getting a good job, but it's also regulating the bad actors in the economy that are putting good businesses out. I just gave the example of how big tech companies are decimating local small business journalism across every single one of our community to our detriment. And so I think we need to ensure that our regulatory regime is really positioning itself so it's supporting small businesses, starting businesses, medium manufacturing and productivity, and not geared towards these ephemeral financial services that so much of our economy has been geared towards. There's a really great financial working group report at the UBCM that talks about how much of our wealth in Canada has shifted from productive manufacturing bases over the years into ephemeral stock and financialization of real estate. And that is not good for the productive workforce. And that's where you need to make a shift.
And Kallee.
Well, just to emphasize the spirit of that question, the top 100 CEOs in Canada in 2023 made 210 times the average salary of Canadians. That's $13.2 million each. Wouldn't that be lovely? So talk about a shrinking pie. What I'm about to say is nothing groundbreaking. We really need leadership on tax policy. If you look at research from the Centre for Policy Alternatives, over the last 20 years, the progressiveness of our tax system has remained relatively flat. We saw significant tax reductions under Martin and Harper, and very modest increases in tax progressiveness under our current system. So I really want to endorse the recommendations from the Centre for Policy Alternatives and Canadians for Tax Fairness, which focus on increasing the progressivity of the income tax system, raising corporate income taxes, and specifically bringing in a windfall profits tax that would really work against the profiteering that we saw during the pandemic. Oh, and tax inheritances and wealth.
Keith?
I agree with all that. Right? That's fundamentally, I think, one of the issues that we have in this riding, or that we've had in our other riding, you guys were in a different riding, you had Canning, so that's been a different story. But we need to bring what Richard was doing to the other side of the East Kootenays. There are a lot of federal and provincial programming available to support people building successful lives here in the Kootenays, and what we do need to do on a ground level is really rebuild our constituency capacity and capability so that we're getting everything that we're entitled to here in Columbia-Kootenay-Southern Rockies. And I know it's not up in the policy realm, but I think it's going to be critical at ensuring that we're prospering here in this riding is making sure that you can go down to an office in Trail and talk to someone who can help you access federal programming, and if something's not working, can take that back to the office, and that they're working strongly with someone in Cranbrook and someone in Nelson to make sure that we're getting everything that we're entitled to here in the Kootenays.
And one more comment from Kallee.
Just wanted to bore you even more about tax policy. I just think it's important to note that I think a lot of Canadians think we have a really progressive tax system because they look to the US, but actually compared to OECD countries, we're really quite moderate and middling. And if you look at that 20-year trajectory, the top income earners have actually had regressive changes within their taxation. So they're actually paying less over that period. And I also just wanted to go back to the profiteering note. Since 2020, we've all experienced this. Groceries have risen by 25%, unless you go to Ferrero's. I don't know how they do it. It's a magical place in Canada. A small business, yay, a small business. So really that profit windfalls tax would go a long way to de-incentivizing that kind of profiteering, and I just wanted to emphasize that.
Housing is a basic necessity for everyone, of course, but more and more Canadians just can't afford good homes to buy or to rent. What's your answer? And we'll start with, I think we start with Kallee this time.
Okay. I'm losing track too, Keith. It's totally fine. All right. Well, I feel strongly about getting the federal government back into the business of developing housing. We had a boom in cooperative housing developments in the 70s. All of those federal programs ended in 1992, and the existing units badly need renovation. So I was thrilled to see a commitment in the current NDP platform specifically to support co-op and nonprofit housing models. I know that there are so many community organizations on the ground that are ready and waiting for investment and are ready to get shovels in the ground. Furthermore, cost-sharing arrangements between the federal government and the provinces really should continue to focus on those cooperative and nonprofit housing models, as well as working with co-ops to ensure that people in those units can stay in them. Again, they badly need upgrades and support for renovation, and we know how much more cost-effective it is to keep people in the units that they have. Research from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation has shown that there's an increasing share of people living in encampments who recently lost their rental housing. We really need to focus on increasing rental supports. I think BC is a leader in this. We need better protections across the country.
This is going to be a continuation of the programming that we have out there. The federal government and the province, we are very lucky to live in BC, where there has been really progressive policies put in place to try and bring up the purpose-built non-market rentals and build more of them. But what's needed and what needs to go back to Ottawa and be advocated for is making sure that these programs are scaled down to a rural size. As much as we're in the city of Trail, and I'm from the city of Nelson, we're very much rural communities. And a lot of this programming is positioned and geared towards a lot larger centers. So ensuring that this programming works. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. As making sure that this works for us and that it scales and that we can access that programming and those funds is critical. Excuse me.
Oh, actually, I didn't have much to add. I think we both covered that beautifully. What do you think, Keith?
I think that's fine. Good answers. And this is our last question that we had preset. The Conservatives, as we all know, are running far ahead in the polls. And it looks like the next election is a done deal, sadly. It looks that way. What are your concerns about a Conservative majority government led by Pierre Poilievre? Should we start with Kate?
Sure. All right, well, I have many concerns, but if I must pick just one to start off with, I'm seriously concerned about a rise in hate crimes. As part of the work that I was doing during the pandemic, I was interviewing and writing about research happening in Canada, specifically around anti-Asian hate. And it is remarkable, the correlation between comments from world leaders, so I'm sure we're all thinking of the same person down south, and a sudden steep increase in hate crimes, anti-Asian hate crimes in that incidence. And the RCMP specifically note 2016 as a point in which it was a point of no return for an increase in hate crimes in this country. And of course, Poilievre comes out of the legacy of Stephen Harper, who declared in 2009 that Canada has no colonial legacy, or no history of colonialism, to be exact. I don't know what he meant by that. Did he think settlers just popped out of the ground like mushrooms? I really don't know. But of course, that's the lineage that Poilievre is coming out of when he rants about wokeism and the damage that it's doing to this country. I think that is absolutely dangerous rhetoric, and it will have real impacts on marginalized Canadians.
I agree. Fundamentally, what we're looking at when we look at the conversations that's been happening at the federal level has been this focus on personalities and this focus on blaming Trudeau for everything. I think Kallee is completely correct that when we set the tone at the top that we can treat people in a certain amount of disrespect, it unbridles the fringes within our support base, and that creates the dangerous situations that we run into. Obviously this area has been very prominent in the national news for some of those individuals that we have in our area. And it takes away, because it has this very vapid nature in terms of how we're talking about the issues that actually have impact. And so we're not really talking about the things that we need to be doing. We're not talking about the challenges and the opportunities and how we bring people along. We're not addressing the mechanics of how we'll do it. We're not addressing the pain we're going to have to feel up front to get to a better place. We're talking catchphrases, and we're talking about looking for gotchas, and we're mugging for the camera, and that is really something that we need to change on a federal level, because we need to be working all the way up from the provincial, from the federal to the province to the local governments, and back out into community.
And Kallee, a little more.
Sure, yeah, just continuing on the themes of terrifying things that Poilievre has said. His commitment to retreating from humanitarian aid also gravely concerns me at this moment. We're currently experiencing a resurgence of tuberculosis in Canada, largely in Canada's north. If we learned anything during COVID, it should be that we need to be at the table working with our international partners in a coordinated way to support global public health and humanitarian aid. So I'm deeply concerned about his retreat from the international stage.
And I guess that's brings a really good story that is happening here. And I don't think within all the terrible stories we hear, we get enough of the good stories. Here in BC, because we sit with a very progressive government, and we've been working diligently on our public health issues and our housing issues, and ensuring that we're delivering value to people on the ground. HIV infection rates in BC are some of the lowest they've ever been. We are finally turning the curve on the HIV epidemic, and that has been something that has been with us the entirety of my adult life, and it demonstrates, just like tuberculosis before, and where we're losing steam there, but also smallpox and measles and all of the rest, that when we do focus in on just good policy and driving in at making sure people are getting access to the care that they need, that we can eradicate some of these things from our society. But we have to take it across the line, and so we have to continue to do that.
Great. Well, I think you should give the candidates an applause for that, I would say. We rattled through a lot of content in a short order there. I think you're getting the value for your money tonight. But I want you to think now for a few minutes of what you might want to ask Kallee and Keith, because that's coming up in just a minute here. But first, you lucky people, I get to harangue you for a moment, because I happen to believe our world is in a big mess. Donald Trump, as you no doubt heard, wants to swallow our country whole. California's burning. Hollywood is burning. And we wait to see what our next summer here is like. We're in a climate crisis, a real crisis. And that's just the small stuff. Canadian families are being squeezed and more insecure than they have been practically since the 1930s. You know this. You know this in your own family. I know it in my family. The out-of-control cost of housing and food, and out-of-control profits that are being made by the wealthiest. It's really hurting all the rest of us. Now we face the prospect of Pierre Poilievre becoming Prime Minister. I think it's very scary. Do you think Poilievre even cares about how tough Canadians have it? I think he's concerned about profits. He cares about as much as Donald Trump does, I'm afraid. Yeah, I actually am afraid. I think we should all be afraid. I'm afraid of Pee-Pee. That's what some people call him, Pierre Poilievre, Pee-Pee. He would only make things worse for us, much, much, much worse. And our Conservative representative, Rob Morrison, who was frankly helicoptered into Cranbrook to run in this riding several years ago. Have you heard of him? Many of you haven't, because he really isn't around much. He's just a waste paper. Except for the tax householders that we all get that say as little as possible. But he's way conservative too. He doesn't talk about climate change. He doesn't talk about protecting Medicare, about protecting our public health care system, or about supporting CBC. He doesn't even talk about the right to choice and abortion, or improving the social state. None of that. He doesn't talk about that at all. That's not his style. And I would say that the Conservative style is dinosaur politics. It's from another age. From a Paleolithic era. Survival of the fittest. The big ones munch down on the little ones. The rich get richer. I'm fed up. So here, in the riding of Kootenay-Columbia-Southern Rockies, we have an important job that's important for the whole country. It's our job to defeat a dinosaur politician. That's the best thing we can do now to help people get good jobs, to get people safe housing for our families, better access to health care services, protection of our public health care system, which is under attack. There's no doubt about it. Certainly, climate action. Trudeau has been middling on climate action. Poilievre will be death on climate action. It'll be a real problem. So you're here in Trail, but it was in 2015 we elected Wayne Stetsky as our NDP member of Parliament in this what years now you're riding as well, and we were very pleased about that, and he did a great job as our member of Parliament. Now we have to get on the job and get an NDP representation here again. And it sure is wonderful, isn't it, to have some great people like Keith and Kallee who are ready to do it. You're going to have a tough time deciding how to vote. So this is our job. I think it's our civic responsibility to the whole country to do our part to try and prevent political disaster from happening in our country. And we can start here tonight, because you're here, you came. And you know that to vote in this nomination, I think you know, I told you, you have to be a member by Monday, January 13th. And I want to mention, when you gave a donation to the federal party, they used to automatically tick off the membership fee and make you a member. They don't do that anymore. And some people are you have to separately sign a form saying you want to be a member, and it's $10. So make sure you do that. By all means, donate. Donate, but be sure to sign the membership form too, or don't be disappointed and discover on voting day that you're not a due member. Jacqueline at the back will have the way to do it for you easily at the end here, and you can do it online in a couple of minutes and sign your life away. It's all at ndp.ca. Click on more, then find the link, become a member. It's only $10. And there's also a place where you can donate to this very riding association to help us in our campaign here to get one of these two fine people elected to Ottawa to representatives. Conservative campaigns have no end of wealthy donors. We are up against big money, folks. But it's us who are going to have to make our party to provide the finances to get our party. And you may know our party is not well heeled at the moment. We need lots of donations. And the way it works is if you pay taxes and your first, I think it's $150, you get up to 75% back on your tax return. And after that, I think it declines to 50%, all the way to, you can donate up to, and I sure hope to hear that some people are going to do this, $1,725 in a year. But don't go over the limit. They'll punish us if you go over the limit. But feel free to donate $1,725. But you get a little less back on your taxes on the $1,725. Well, that's actually a good thing that in Canada, the most you can donate in a year an individual can donate is $1,725. It's not like Elon Musk. My gosh. Maybe you're not rich. I mean, you're here. I mean, really, if you are here with us tonight, you probably aren't rich. Any rich people here? But almost everyone can afford to contribute something, I think. You know, almost everybody can. I know I can. If I can, you can. And here's the most important thing of all. It's not even money. The most important thing is your time and energy. So you're the people who can do this. We're looking for volunteers to build a big campaign team right across this riding, including in Trail. And we need people to help with collecting volunteers, coordinating volunteers, volunteering, going to the polls, going door to door, running a campaign office here in Trail if we can, and all of that. So that's going to take lots. So think about what you can do. Small bits help, big bits help. Some of us, we contribute according to what we can. Jacqueline, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I just want to add an ideas board over here, and then I have a booklet. So when you're leaving, if you want to put your name down, and I can follow up with you if you have any ideas for any of that, and then you can go online here and just sign up as a volunteer.
The easy thing is sign up as a volunteer, goes right into the database, and we've got you, and we know where you are and where you live. So sign up at the back and volunteer. Fill it in and get involved. Be patient to hear from us. We're all volunteers. Nobody here is getting paid. We're all volunteering our time because of this. Here in Kootenay, Columbia, we have the ability to take on dinosaurs. And I think it's really important we can do it and send some real people's representation to Ottawa. Only the NDP in this riding stands a chance of defeating the Conservative. We're the only ones who are going to come close. The Liberals are crashing and burning badly. Poilievre and the Conservatives are going to sit back smug, spread some more disinformation, and tell us a little as possible about what they would really do to Canadians. Here, only the NDP and one of our brave candidates can topple a dinosaur politician. It's up to us to do it for the sake of Canadians everywhere. So after our question period, I'd like to see you at the back signing up, filling in your form, and donating some money. Thanks very, very much. Thanks for coming, everybody. Now, here comes the fun part of the evening. The wild and woolly. Let's see how wild and woolly you can make it. So does anyone have any questions? And we're going to try and what we're going to try and do is pass a microphone around, and we'll pass this one into the audience, and we'll try and use this one, the feedback one. Does anybody have any questions? Dave Gregory, you wouldn't be the president of the Riding Association, would you?
I think so. Sometimes I forget. Well, I was interested to see which the committee chose as the key questions to ask, and there was one that I would have put on the list, so I'll ask it right now. Now, our wonderful Prime Minister, after the first election, when he was elected, said that was the last first past the post election. And that was his promise, that he would change, that there would be electoral reform. We thought he meant he'd bring in PR. He probably didn't. He probably meant he'd bring in single transferable vote or something. But at any rate, he didn't do anything. All those 10 years, he had the opportunity, he did nothing. So my question for you two is, do you support the official NDP support for proportional representation, and why do you?
Short answer. Are we timing? We still get 1 minute?
Yeah,
Okay.
we still get 1 minute.
Darn, I thought maybe we just got to rattle on.
No, we're good. If you could pass that mic to the next person when it's time.
Yes, yeah. I was absolutely devastated to see the last referendum on proportional representation fail in BC. That's a measure that I've long supported. Given the shifts in population around the country, the way that our seats are currently distributed has just absolutely not kept pace with the redrawing of seat boundaries. And as we know, the constant changing of boundaries, like we've talked about earlier, is deeply frustrating and is never accomplishes what needs to happen. If I have time, I do want to say as well, when that mandate was taken away from Karina Gold as the Minister of Democratic Institutions, it also took a knock against Trudeau as a feminist for me. Karina Gold was actually at McGill with me. I already mentioned my fancy pants education. And I was absolutely devastated that here's a first-time young female MP put into a really high-profile portfolio coming out of that election saying we are going to accomplish democratic reform, and then she had it snatched away from her. She's gone on to great things, but that absolutely was devastating to me, in addition to the loss of opportunity to actually fix our electoral system.
Could I expand on that?
No, Jim, if you could just wait 1 minute, we'll give Keith a shot at it.
And then expand.
Well, the reason why I want to expand on that is ranked ballots or proportional.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give Kallee a chance to address that too in due course. Keith, go ahead.
I 100% agree that we need to transform how we are electing people. It's clear when we look around the world to the other models, there are ways that we can more fairly represent what people who are voting want to have as representative. So I think it's incredibly important that we do that work, and then when it comes up that we support it. So I support it. I also think whenever you're trying to build the momentum around people understanding and embracing that kind of change, it can be scary. You can definitely hear from the other side this idea of the unknown and what are the implications of that. So in trying to elevate that work, one of the pieces I've been doing is there's a resolution that I'm putting forward to Nelson City Council through our local government space to bring ranked choice balloting as an option for mayoral races within the province of BC. That's something that we're going to debate on at council and send to the KBLG and send to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. And my hope there specifically is that by introducing people at the mayoral level on what it looks like to vote for something else and allowing it to be an option at the municipal level to choose to do that, allows pockets of places to start to exercise that kind of system.
I'm going to take the mic back. Jim did ask about the difference between proportional representation and ranked ballot, and it's a very relevant question. So I'm going to ask the candidates both to address it. I want to say just one thing about it is that Justin Trudeau actually favored a ranked ballot system, and a ranked ballot system in the federal situation, because the Liberals are often everybody's second choice, would have favored the Liberal Party immensely. That all the studies showed that it would. And proportional representation, whether it's a mixed member or one of the other systems that actually allocate the seats to the parties according to the vote, is quite different. So, but that's just my quick explanation of it, but I don't know where you stand on the difference between the ranked ballot and proportional representation.
Just to answer quickly, I think both would be an improvement. I do think more consultation has to be done to see what would be most readily accepted, but we do know there are significant instances of ranked ballots happening at the provincial and local level across Canada already, so a lot of people are very familiar with that. I do think that would likely have the most highly likelihood of quick adoption and support, but we do need to act quickly. And absolutely, studies show that there would be a higher representation of progressive politicians, and particularly NDP, in the modeling if we move to either of those models.
No.
We'll go to another. Is there any other questions on the floor? Can we pass the mic back?
Oh, behind you? I'm sorry. Oh, did you also have your hand? It doesn't matter. You go first. Okay.
Could you just introduce yourself, say your name, please?
My name is Rebecca Richards. I live here in Trail. And as it's been pointed out, the Liberals are likely to crash and burn in the next election. And I'm just interested in the candidates' perspectives on what the federal NDP should be doing to try and capture some of the center-left that are not going to be interested in voting for Poilievre, but might be swayed to the NDP side. So what sort of policies would you like to see the federal party putting forward as a way to try and capture those votes, since we're still in the first past the post system?
Good question. Keith, do you want to start?
I think, interestingly enough, we're losing a lot of people with very progressive values to the Conservatives because they've been campaigning for longer. They've been on the taxpayer dime, but they're very much making a promise, attempting to make a promise that they're going to improve things. And I think predominantly what the NDP needs to do is articulate how the policies that we've been seeing on the provincial level as NDP, the representation we've been seeing from the members, has actually had impacts on improving affordability for Canadians and improving what it looks like for everyday workers on the ground in this country. I think there's a really strong case within this riding to demonstrate that we can send really strong representation to Ottawa, and that we can bring some of those funds and that entitlement back to the area and actually just improve how these communities are built and how we're addressing things on the ground for people. We're the worker party.
Yeah, that's such an important question, and I think the NDP is in a really challenging position right now, where I think Jagmeet feels the need to differentiate ourselves from the Liberals. But that means it's really hard to claim our successes on things like the emerging pharmacare program and dental care. We know that Canadians really don't like to see benefits pulled away from them. Governments tend to be punished when they really take away a lot of benefits that Canadians have gotten used to. So I do think we just have to get over our fear of being lumped in with the Liberals. I think we really need to stand by our records of the things that we were able to accomplish in the last government and really confirm and clarify for people how much money is being saved every year, being kept in their pockets because they don't have to pay out of pocket for every single dental surgery and all of those other things that they finally have access to. Free contraceptives, yay, all that great stuff. We just need to hold strong to our record.
I think we're good. Did you have a question?
Sure.
Okay, if you could just say your name.
Name is Dara. So you, Keith, you have municipal political experience, and you're with the West Kootenay Arts Council. There's a lot of politics involved in that. How do you think that experience can be translated into a federal level, and how do you differentiate macro versus micro, like small scale, large scale issues within your process? Because you have to manage both, but it's different jobs.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I really love working within national organizations like I've done for much of my career for that reason, because you are toggling between the micro and the macro. You get to be talking to individuals on the ground about what they're experiencing in their communities, in their organizations, and then zooming out and looking at how to support that in a way that floats all boats, really, that works with other jurisdictions as well. And that's a really rewarding process for me. Really, my experience at the federal level comes from advocacy within the charitable sector. I worked within the public policy team at Imagine Canada, and we were and still are focused on aims like getting a home for government for the sector outside of the CRA, really a department and a place that can advocate internally for the charitable sector. We were really active during COVID in ensuring that the sector was supported with CEBA and that those supports that were coming down the pipeline were able to be tailored to the sector. I was on the phone for hours and hours and hours doing exactly what you just alluded to, talking to organizations across the country and figuring out what we could do in our advocacy to ESDC, to Finance Canada, to support those organizations on the ground all across the country.
I think it comes down to ensuring that people are able to carry the mantle for the policy work that needs to happen in the first place. Within municipal government and within the association and within the province, we have to ensure that programs are working for people, but then that they have the freedom and the autonomy and the ability to execute on whatever it is that they're identifying on the ground. I think we see really great examples of how anyone can throw a wrench into anything and cause a program not to work. It's so easy to tear something down and prevent progress from being made. We see that within the Conservatives' caucus in terms of them, in terms of Pierre Poilievre giving direction that members of Parliament not support the Housing Accelerator Fund within their communities, and therefore causing those programs not to be as successful. And so one of the things we need to change within the conversation on the federal level is ensuring that we're all rowing within the same direction and able to actually make these programs work for each other.
Did you want anything to add?
Oh, are we doing that for?
Well, we can. Yeah, we can. We said we would.
I wasn't thinking ahead,
No,
so I will.
okay. Well, we can go to the next. Does anyone else have a question? Good. Please say your name.
My name's Allison, and I voted NDP. No, I worked on behalf of our local candidate for the provincial election, and I have to say that one of the issues that came up, and this is going to be contrary to our notions of stripping away programs, was fiscal accountability. And it's one of the areas that people are looking at the NDP as not being fiscally accountable on the federal level. And in part, they have tied in some of the huge faux pas that the Liberals have, the spending faux pas. They've tied those also to the NDP. So I'd just like to hear your comments on that.
I think this gets back to what I was saying before, especially for this area with our resource industries, is how much we're making investments in those value-add components of the economy. I think part of where the Liberals have gotten lost is chasing after these kind of ephemeral business development pieces. We think of the ArriveCan app and the obscene amounts of money that got sucked into that. The NDP as a party and as a policy has been focused on those things that benefit Canadians in terms of dental care, in terms of fighting for better wages and union rights and the ability for productive labor to get a better share of what it needs. And I think we need to continue to reiterate that that is where our focus has been within this minority coalition. Because I agree with you, when you look at either Liberals or the Conservative, it's big party politics to the benefit of big corporations and the people that are in the wealth class, and that's not our rural reality. And so when it's coming to representing this area, we need to be focused as a party on what helps people just on the ground and continue to go to our roots for that.
Just one other point to that, though. They're looking at the public service as being reined in. And that's where the Conservatives are making headway, is because there's an underlying current there that the Conservatives are going to rein in the public service.
Yeah. I just want to state clearly, I am not an NDPer because I want a few more good jobs or I want the minimum wage to raise a little bit. I want to see a full-scale transformation of our economy to one that is fair, and I want to see bold policy solutions, bold tax policy, bold things put on the table that the Liberals aren't willing to do. That purchase of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, for instance, what is a disaster in terms of balancing the books, and that wasn't considered a subsidy to the fossil fuel industry. Right? I think as NDPers, as Social Democrats, we will say no to those kind of benefits that prop up industries that we should not be supporting in the first place. Right? There's a lot of money that's going down the drain that way, and I think if the Liberals did us a favor, it was putting that capital gains tax on the table and initially taking the flak for that, because I do think we have as I mentioned before, we have a long way to go in making our tax system fair and truly putting us in line with the kind of revenue that we need to respond to emerging emergencies across the country. We're being pummeled by one emergency after another when it comes to climate effects, and we need that extra revenue on the books, and we need to make some hard choices and stand by our progressive policies as Social Democrats.
Well, what a great discussion we're having, folks. Any other questions?
If I can respond.
Yes, certainly. Sorry.
I agree with you in the terms of how our messaging goes forward, that we need to be able to demonstrate with all of the programming, and I see the same comments about, the public service has increased X number, and then you dig back a couple years and you find out, well, there were cuts before, and so these swings in percentages are very enticing, of course, because the way statistics and messaging work, it can be very enticing to see 18% one way or another. But we need to be sure that we're helping people understand that when we do dental care, we are saving costs in the system elsewhere. When we make your tax form, when we work with the CRA and ensure that for the predominant amount of people that their taxes are automatically filed and that there's an efficiency brought forward because that's good mechanical policy that works for people, that saves time, effort everywhere else in the economy. And almost so much of what our public service does is about saving us collectively and sharing a cost collectively so we can get more done with less in the first place. And we have to defend those public services and make sure people understand the value that they bring, because they are getting more than if they just went out and bought it themselves.
Steve Morissette.
I'm not in your driving.
No. I can still say I'm a new MLA for Kootenay-Monashee, and you can't blame me for anything yet.
1 year. You got 1 year.
Thank you guys for stepping up. It's awesome. I appreciate it. My question is around immigration and the impact it's having on rural colleges. So Selkirk College and College of the Rockies have a huge impact by the immigration changes, because there's no, I don't know the correct term, but students can't get a work permit afterwards anymore. So Selkirk College, for example, is projecting losing 500 students. They pay 3 times as much as domestic students. So that's like they need to recruit 1,500 students to stay the same financially. It's a challenge for them, and it's the same throughout the province, through all the rural colleges. What can you say about immigration? What's your stance? Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I really feel like that solution was manufactured by the cutting of education support across the board, federally and provincially, right? Colleges had to make the choice of essentially downloading the costs of domestic education onto international students. That was a disaster waiting to happen. It's not fair for those international students. It honestly makes me sick. So many of them can't find adequate housing. The solutions are so late and $1 short on this. I'm really just echoing your concerns. I don't have a lot of solutions yet, but I think in the interim there needs to be some absolute emergency support and an injection of funding into colleges and universities to get over this lump. I know I have friends and colleagues who have lost their teaching jobs in the last 3 months. The faculties are just getting shredded, and then when we're losing those programs, we're going to continue losing people coming to the colleges because they can't find the education that they're looking for. We don't have access to those training opportunities locally that service our local economy. We absolutely, just at a very minimum, need an injection of support for those colleges right now.
I'm very agreeable. So I definitely agree that we need to have a model for post-secondary education that properly supports especially our rural colleges. On the immigration issue specifically, we have another side of this issue that's coming down the chute, which is we're starting to have, and already have in some places, a reputation amongst those people that would immigrate here that this is not truly a place where they can set down, that this is an unaffordable place, that this is a difficult place to get a job, that they will be treated and mistreated by people that are coming through, that they're being taken advantage of. And so as much as we might go through this next set of leadership one way or another way, that poisoning of the well that's going on right now, I've employed people from the business administration program from Selkirk and leveraged that within my own small business. We're sitting inside of a shift of a demographic where we need these employees to be coming online and stepping up, and we need to ensure that we are continually looked at it as a place from around the world where people want to come and want to spend their brain power investing in the Canadian future. And if we don't shift the conversation to a more productive place that's respectful and speaks from our Canadian values, we will struggle finding those workers.
And just one small addition to that, getting affordability under control is going to be absolutely critical. Those stories are real. Absolutely skilled workers here in Canada are deciding, you know what, I've been here for 10 years, I can no longer afford it. I'm going to go back to my home country because this actually was not as helpful to me as I thought it would be. I have friends and colleagues here from all over the world who are looking at our prices going, wow, you know how much cheaper I can get these Blundstones in Germany or what have you. That's a very, small, silly example, but this is real. It's now a staple of our national media that every week there's a story of a first-person account of someone saying, you know what, I really thought Canada was going to be the place for me, and I changed my mind. And we need to tackle the affordability issues to stop those stories from coming down the pipeline.
We've still got more time. Jake, yeah?
Thanks, Steve. First off, thanks to both of you guys. Really difficult to put your name forward for public office, and I think actually from the whole room, these two deserve a little bit of a round of applause here for standing up for the party. So thank you. My question is a simple one. It's certainly not complex. Campaigns are a lot of work. You have a really difficult challenge ahead of you in a strong incumbent. If you look at the results of the last election, there were actually more progressives in the riding, across the old riding, certainly not the new riding, than conservatives, though Rob won. I guess simplistically, how do you guys plan to win? You know, you got a campaign against a strong incumbent. What are you going to do to win, and how are you going to accomplish that on the day that the vote is rendered and the candidate is put forward?
Well, it comes down to, first off, what we've already done is build a great EDA, a great riding association. So, and just take a moment here, everybody on the board would put their hand up and just let everyone know who's on it. We've got Lori, Patricia, Keith, Mitch, Jacqueline, Dave up here. So we've done a really good job of bringing the board together in the first place, so that there's a strong team in that respect that has the backing. This is a new riding for the next 10 years. And so not only this election, but the elections in the future, we need to keep building that base. And I think we have to outwork Rob Morrison. Rob Morrison has already demonstrated over his last 6 years that he's not willing to put the work in the riding. He's not willing to travel to local councils and talk to them. He's not willing to show up in community outside of a donation event. And so it's really fundamentally about letting people know that and finding spaces. I have had close ties to the Green Party in the past. We Liberals have never really had a showing here, and it's about communicating to both of those segments that we need to unify as a left and get this guy out of office and put someone here who's going to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a blessing that we have in this area is that the Liberals are not particularly competitive. So we win in a strategic voting conversation, 100%. I think we need to get back to what we saw during the days of Harper, which was the ABC movement, anything but conservative. Since we launched our campaigns, I've just been hearing from members about absolute terror, about the prospect of a Pierre Poilievre-led government. And I really think we can lean on that. We are the choice to keep Poilievre from gaining an MP in this riding, and that's very clear. We are absolutely the clearest choice to do that. And the fear is out there, absolutely. So I think we can capitalize on that.
I do want to add more. So you're all in the room, and Jacqueline has a book, and she wants not only ideas, but she wants your contact information. And so if you walk out of this room and you don't give her that contact information, and you're not going to step up and go talk to your neighbors and say, how are we going to improve this situation? Why is this good representation? Why are we going to fight for the environment and for affordability and for healthcare, and they're not? It's going to take us. It's not just going to be us. It's going to take us. And so really, I want you to all take that home, and I want you to really step up and make sure you're giving Jacqueline her contact information she needs, and really make sure you're signing up friends and neighbors. And just a couple a week. Every week, if you find a few people that you can get signed up, that is going to make a big difference in a couple months.
And if you haven't tried door-to-door canvassing yet, it is a great workout. Just saying. A really, really great way to burn calories.
I have a question, and thank you. And I just want to say a little tech thing, because I thought I was going to be so tech savvy here. I have an iPad and a computer, and I have this great forum that we have, but apparently it will only take the one entry from my computer, and then, so I'm just going to, because it's set up that way for your IP address, right? So it's a bit of we have to fix this, but I will have to take your names and email you the link, and then you can go and fill it out yourself. So, okay. I have, yeah, I made tattoos, like QR codes. Like, no, it's okay. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to go on your question about fat government employees, no, not fat government employees, sorry, about a plumped up government system and our economy, and I have a question because I worked for many years in mental health, and here in the I'm a social worker, and here in the Kootenays, more than any other place in BC, we had triple caseloads of people on our caseloads, and they didn't have that in Kelowna or anywhere else, and as a social worker over the years working in different political parties, they tend to squeeze down on those kinds of systems. And what happens is that, so they just got bankrupted. And then it starts to look like who's ever in government right now is the one that did it. But it wasn't. They built up over many years. And so what I want to ask for the two of you is, how do you see your role in working with the federal and the provincial government to have a mental health system that's sustainable?
So I think it's fair to say Cranbrook, Nelson, and Trail are all in very similar boats when it comes to mental health, street disorder, and people experiencing extreme poverty. And we all struggle with the same situation day to day on our streets. And one of the lessons I've taken away from these years is how important it is as all three layers of government that we're all doing our part. Now, it's up to the feds to transfer monies from the large corporations and the very rich and fund programs and make sure that we're getting that kind of funding. It's up to the province to be delivering health care and ensuring that our certification and our experts that are helping those people on the ground are being deployed. And it's up to local government to play a role in the coordination and the information that's flowing back up. I was sitting down with the Union for the Firefighters in Nelson just the other day because we've seen massive increases in calls dealing with overdoses, dealing with mental health calls. It's putting a huge strain. It's putting a huge strain on that workforce. And it's just fundamentally important that each layer of our government is coming in a very honest and authentic way to address the issue for those people on the ground, because it's cheaper, quite frankly, in the end to start taking care of someone sooner before things start spiraling out of control than it is to come in and try and clean up things afterwards and the negative impacts that come with that. We know that's true of the mental health crisis, and we know it's true of the climate crisis, and we just really need to ensure that we're spending time and resources on the people that need it so that we can all participate in the Canadian story.
Yeah, that's such a serious issue, and one of the pieces of the NDP platform right now that I really am so committed to is that the NDP would declare the opioid and mental health crisis a national public emergency, and that would unlock more possibilities for partnerships with local governments, with provinces. One of the other pieces in the NDP platform around affordable housing is fast-tracking financing to nonprofits to get those developments on the ground. I would love to see a similar kind of commitment to fast-tracking investment specifically for solutions like complex care housing. We know that there are organizations, particularly in Nelson, the Nelson Committee on Homelessness and others, who are desperately in need of space, who are struggling to access it, that are looking to build new resources specifically for supportive housing and for people who need those addiction and mental health supports. I think within the NDP platform, there are some really wonderful tactics for that. I'd love to see fast-track measures for investment that not only nonprofits but municipalities could also access.
Oh, okay. We're running out of camera. I don't know what that means, whether we have to stop it.
All the cameras are gone now.
We're pretty close to time. We have to wind it down the next 10 minutes or so, but...
Battery's dead, and this one's inches away.
That's okay.
Well done.
In the question,
There's a question over in the corner over there.
Hello. I am new to the Kootenays. I actually just moved here from the Toronto Danforth riding, so one that you know well. Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate the focus what has been said and the focus on local issues, and I understand how that is obviously top of mind. Something else that has been weighing heavily on my mind, and I'm sure many others for the past 16 months, is the genocide that's being committed in Palestine. And I'm just wondering if elected, I know there's a few steps ahead of that, but would you join your fellow NDP MPs like Leah Gazan, Nikki Ashton, Heather McPherson, Matthew Green in calling for an immediate two-way arms embargo on Israel?
Absolutely, yes. Only since December has Canada been voting in favor of a ceasefire at the UN. It's about damn time. And yes, the government said that they are committed to an arms embargo, but haven't fully implemented it. It's been a very soft, kind of double speak kind of situation, and absolutely I think it will fall on the NDP to ensure that that decision has some integrity and that there really is an urgent two-way arms embargo, 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty categorically, war crimes need to be stood up against, and we have war crimes that are being committed, and we have hate crimes that are being committed against people on both sides here in the country, and we need to stop that. We need to speak against that, and we need to ensure that we are promoting peace around the world. It's part of our Canadian values, and so we need to continue to work forward to resolve these situations, both on an international stage and also here for the people that live on both sides in our country, because we cannot be separated by these issues, these international issues here locally, and we cannot be silent when there are crimes and there's death and there's starvation going on around the world, and we have to stand up for our values.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, please.
I'm not real happy with the media coverage of a lot of politicians in this country, or the neighbors either, actually. So my question is, when one of you are elected,
That's
hello?
a win, for sure, yeah.
How will you use the media and technology to keep your constituents informed, to recruit young people, and to change the national conversation representing the values of this party so that Canadians understand that this is the party to run this country? That was polite.
Microphone's in front of me, so I'll go first. As far as messaging is concerned, I'm really active in the Nelson area on the Nelson groups, and people see me all the time. And my approach has always been to throw a dry PDF on the fire. There's a lot of ways that people get a sense of what's going on that's not true, and it causes a lot of harm in terms of trying to get productive things done. And we have to constantly be getting out there and doing the work in terms of like, this is where this decision came from. This is the report that you're looking for. This is the section that you're looking for. The reality is local journalism has collapsed in this world. And I alluded to it earlier, but predominantly big tech companies have taken all the advertising dollars we used to spend on local journalism, and they've captured it for themselves. And so we have to meet people on the platforms they're on. We have to be on the TikToks. We have to be on the Facebooks. We have to be on the Instagram. And we need to continually communicate out what we're doing in a very objective way that is approachable to those people so they can understand what's actually happening and disseminate amongst all of this garbage that's out there. And we are flooded, absolutely flooded with low quality information, and it's causing us to have low quality conversations, and we have to fight against that.
Thanks so much for that question, Larry. Yeah, I think part of that needs to be also turning the camera around and highlighting all the people that engage with government. I think part of the disenchantment that people have with our political system is they don't understand how to engage with politicians. They don't understand how to engage with the system. They feel like Parliament is over there and they can't influence anything that happens. And I want to highlight and champion all of the people who are scheduling meetings with their MPs, who are showing up and doing Hill Days in Ottawa, who are getting out and doing really wonderful things and putting the focus on those incredible efforts that do have impact, and like he said, telling the story of how those accomplishments actually happen in Ottawa. And yes, absolutely, we need to be on the Instagram, we need to be on the TikToks, all the things. I also care about long-form content. We cannot simplify complex issues. We are in an era of the polycrisis, and we need to ensure that all of those short snippets are balanced out with really intelligent pieces that can really get into the issues. I don't think we have enough of that. I think sometimes even within our own party, issues get simplified just to ensure that the messaging can be quick and concise at a door. And that has to happen, absolutely, but it needs to be backed up by really fulsome dialogue, because I think when all our landscape is a whole bunch of 30-second snippets, no one feels like they can accomplish any real change.
I think we're going to call it there. What a great, and give them a hand of applause.